Hey everyone, as promised when I made my SoulBinder guide, I'm gonna make part 2 where I tell you a little bit about how I play the class. Um, Again, I'm an avid PvP player, but I've never really made it to the top 600 ranking of Magic Prison. But I do play Wolf PvP very casually and frequently. So to a certain extent, I have racked up experience on how to play against a team. So the video today will be about how I do set up my skills, what my skill bars look like, and in general how I use the class during fights. So again, quick disclaimer: this build is what works for me. You may or may not like it, so just watch it and then you evaluate whether you want to replicate the same playstyle. Okay, so just a recap. Um, This build is not good for PvE, okay? Literally no value add. In Yo-Yo, you're a punching bag. In Wolf, which will be kind of like my focus for today's video, it's a good offensive and defensive support as well as a disruptor. Woe and Woe C, kind of mediocre. Still useful, but a little bit mediocre. Magic Prison, you can choose either to be Orb Holder or Disruptor. So same thing goes for the other maps. So yeah, in today's video, we're gonna focus a little bit about Wolf, because that's what I do play frequently. For Magic Prison, I'm still trying to feel my way through it. It's kind of difficult because you kind of have to adjust depending on your teammates. But last season, I didn't make it to top 600. First 2 weeks, I tried to play Orb Holder, and then afterwards I shifted to kind of being more disruptor rather than orb holder. Okay, so this is my skill bar setup. So I use 4 skill bars. It's because SoulBinder has a lot of skills and it's just too bad to pass up on any of them. So I use 4 skill bars. It may seem daunting at first, but there's a certain logic. If you employ a certain logic to how you arrange your skill slots, it's kind of easy to remember. And when you play the class over and over again, and you don't change the way your skills are arranged, um, your muscle will just memorize it. Okay, so the skill bar setup, and you see there are some overlays here. It's basically, depending on the situation, I tend to interchange them. So the first bar here is really my disrupt bar. So these are all of the skills generally that I use to disable enemies. My second bar is more for my support role, which I use to buff my allies and save my allies. The third bar is more for assisting in killing or setting up a team wipe. So the last one is more for auxiliary skills. So those skills that you don't use so frequently, but it's always good to have them because when the situation calls for it, you'd be thankful you had it ready. So yeah, these are basically how I arrange my skills. So 4 skill bars, but it's mainly gonna be playing around with these 3. So depending on what your playstyle will be, let's say for example you enter Wolf and you already know that you're facing a very tough opponent. If you feel like, okay, maybe probably I have to focus on support, then your home bar has to be support. It's like that's your default. And then so you move to another bar to cast skills, but then if it permits, you go back to your home bar, right? Just so it's always ready, if ever you have to use it. Mind you, for me, my home bar is always the first one, which is disrupt. Another thing is, if you noticed, on the right side, on the very right side of the bars, that's where I have my survivability skills. So either Soul Walker, Soul of Sage, Hide, or whatever that helps you survive or hide. I usually just keep them in one slot so that I can easily remember them. Now for me, this slot is binded to the shift key on my keyboard. So it's always my pinky finger that presses it. So I know when I'm in danger, it's the pinky finger that has to act. Um, my mouse also has some macro buttons, and so I also have an option to just put it in one of the macro buttons. But it's really up to you. I don't want to prescribe how you bind your keys. But my tip here is the important skills, right? If they're the same in nature, always assign them to the same slot so that your hands can build up that muscle memory. And so it's more reacting rather than thinking, because if you're in the heat of a battle, you don't really get to think a lot. Like, especially for these skills, they have casting. So if you get bombarded with all of those, um, you know, cast time debuff, then you're pretty much done for, right? And so when you notice people starting to gang up on you and you still have the opportunity, you just you just activate your pinky finger right away. Okay, so this is basically how I start off with Wolf, right? So initial clash, or whenever you do a reset and then you're clashing again, I really tend to charge in. Okay, and I can only do this because I'm tanky. Okay, obviously if you're not built for tankiness, you probably shouldn't be doing this, but for me I can do it. So I always charge in. So as you can see, I generally like to stay in front. And the intent really is you cancel those at the back, right? Because you want them to create distance between them and their main stack. Like, you can't kill them. I mean, you're not set up for killing, but you want to slow them down. Every second you buy for your DPS has a big value already. So you want to slow down those at the back. You either soak up their damage, you eat it up so that it's diverted from your main DPS, or you constantly make their support sit, or you slow them down, right? Or maybe you fear them so that they can't react so quickly. So that's really the intent. You just basically charge in, and your goal is to make them, create such a bigger distance between the main stack. Now, obviously, sometimes this works, sometimes this doesn't, and you need to be able to tell when it doesn't work so you can go back to supporting your team. Okay, which brings me to my second point, right? Don't ever forget to support your team as well. I mean, you're good with disrupting, but at the same time, you have two very useful support skills, which is Soul of Knight and Soul of Wizard. Soul of Knight maybe is the discount version, but it still provides good damage reduction, and it provides Endure. And so really, right? I mean, always keep an eye, right? Especially if there's a Slayer that's approaching, or if you see a GS, approaching, then you already know they're trying to hit your main stack. And so what you would really want to do is, you want to bolster the survivability of your DPS. Okay, so you cast Soul of Wizard on one, you cast Soul of Knight on the other, just to try to mitigate the damage. If they die, they do get resurrected on the spot because of your soul. Also, one caveat is always choose to protect your DPS. Your support should have innate tankiness in them. They should be able to survive one drop. Always choose to save your DPS, because they're the ones that are built for damage and not exactly for survivability. It would be good if they can survive, but in general, always assume that your DPS will die quickly. Also, don't think about yourself. The build, if you watch the build video that I made, if you're following my gears, you likely will be able to survive most people. So yeah, so use your Soul of Sage. I mean, the initial drop, right? Don't mind about that. Maybe afterwards use Soul of Sage after you place souls on your DPS. Okay, kind of a few notes, right? So in the middle of the clash, right, if you're unable to separate their backline, um, always assess your enemies, right? And try to determine the two biggest threats, and then you just focus on them. So I know this is easier said than done, right? And maybe you may think like this is this is overcomplicating things, right? But but if you play Wolf long enough, right, and if you just if you're part of those PvP GCs, or you like to engage into tournaments, right, then it's important that you kind of study your enemies. And even if it's the first time you're fighting them and you haven't watched videos of them, I think maybe first few minutes of the game you should have a very good grasp on who are your two biggest threats already. Okay, now Soul of the Crusader is probably your best disable skill. But Soulbinders have a lot more in their pockets, so don't forget that. You just need to have a clear mind, and you need to have a specific target. So don't think that because you've made someone sit already, that's it. There are other things you can still throw at the other people. For me in general, what I see as the biggest threats in PvP are Tyrants, DA, and Yamata ninjas. They can dish out really huge damage. They can um, kill people really quickly, especially sacrifice DAs, right? They can disable, they can taunt your support or your DPS to disable them for a few seconds, but at the same time they can kill them really, really quickly. So these are for me the top threats. um I made this presentation a few days ago, but with the advent of Thanatos, you may want to add Thanatos into your top threats. I did play a couple of games against a team that has a Thanatos in them. It requires my undivided attention just to keep them in check. If I let them go, even for a few seconds, they start wreaking havoc, which is really difficult because then the other DPS are free to make easy pickings on us. So yeah, Thanatos, definitely one of the top threats. Secondary threats I'd say would be Chronomancers, Phantom Dancers, and Soul Blades. Um, Chronomancers, I'm just saying I mean, they would have been on the top threat, but I put them on secondary for me because in general, I know how to deal with them. And if there are good ones, like there are really good Chronomancers out there, right? That just really plays around with you. Um, it still doesn't make sense to put them as your top focus. You're still better off focusing on these top threats on the top. Also, Lightbringers and Begetters are big threats, especially the support types. But as a Soulbinder, specifically this build, there really isn't a lot you can do against them, to stop them. Like, for example, a Lightbringer, once a robot, once the Madagear is on you, even if you make the Lightbringer sit or whatever, or you strip, the Madagear is already there. That's not going to stop. Same thing with the Begetter, right? Once they put in their health plans, the Mandragora, all of those things are already there, and there's really nothing you can do as a Soulbinder. You just have to leave it to your teammates. And so the only thing you can really do is to just make it easier to kill them, which again, you can extract their soul, you can make them bigger so they take more damage. You can use Soul of Priests to cast Lex on them. You can strip them to get rid of their gears. So not a lot you can do to disable them, but instead you can just make it faster to kill them. Okay. So yeah, moving on, right? So when your main stack starts to advance, or when you are in that rumble state, when you're in that state where there is no more front line and back line and everyone's just really in chaos, right? My recommendation is there are three things you have to always take note of. Prio 1, make the player who can make the most difference sit. So that's your threat number 1, your primary threat, right? Make them sit, right? If you feel like it's the Chronomancer, make him sit. And then once your Soul of Crusader is on cooldown, go back to him, make him sit again. Prio 2, extract the souls of those trying to retreat or reposition. You want to you can't stop them from leaving, right? You can't stop them from leaving the clash, but you can extract their souls. The soul's gonna stay there. Likewise, even if they're not leaving, right? Just extracting the soul already means if they're being hit by an AoE, they're receiving damage from the AoE and from the soul. So don't ever forget using Soul Judgment. It's a very important skill. Third priority is use Heart of Darkness. So preferably you would want to use it on someone who does AoE so that they deal damage on their teammates as you're clashing. But casting it on anyone is also okay. Now, obviously, you lose out on the damage, but Heart of Darkness has fear. So it basically casts fear um, in the area of the player you casted it on. So, so what that means is there's a chance you can fear his teammates, right? Which is a good way to disrupt their stack. So yeah, these are the three things, right? When you're in a clash, three things to think about: sit, extract soul, Heart of Darkness, and then you cycle to strip or the other stuff. Now, obviously, this may change a little bit, right? Like for example, if you have a DA and the DA is your top threat, then you may want to use Unreal, right? Or you may wanna use other skills to keep your biggest threat neutralized. You know, maybe if the Yamata is your biggest threat, then you may want to start off with Heart of Darkness. So you just cast Heart of Darkness on the Yamata so that when they cast some of their AoEs and they get caught in it, they instantly die because Yamatas does big damage, but their survivability is very poor. And so this is really how I would recommend you play the class. I wouldn't say this is the best way to play it, but this is the game style I got used to, and so far I'm enjoying it, and so far I'm liking how I'm liking the results basically. There are some clips that I have in my YouTube channel. You can watch the whole fights, but I put in two samples of kind of some sample gameplays in Wolf, right? I wouldn't call them highlights, but kind of displays how I use the class. Like for example, here, you see the PD here. I made him smaller so it's easier to target him. I extracted the soul so that it was easier for my tyrant to kill him. A little bit overkill. I probably shouldn't have done the strip, but some PDs are very, very tanky, and so I didn't want to take chances. The other one here, oops, let me just, okay. The other one here is more like during the clash, right? And this against the Slayer. So if you see here, I saw the Slayer approaching. I protected my DPS. I casted Heart of Darkness, extracted his soul. I moved on to the next target, right? Made him sit, right? And then I made the saint small so they're slower. So really just causing as much confusion as I can. I don't mind being separated because in general I can survive kind of like the damages, and in general I do get the chance to move away. But sometimes I overdo it. Like if you look here, right, this is bad. Actually, this is a bad example. I was too far already, and their team are starting to gather up on this side already, and you see it's going to be very difficult for me to rejoin my team. But yeah, sometimes I get too overconfident and it's causing me to die. But in general, I just can't take the damage. I mean, that's a reason why sometimes I get too overconfident. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Thanks guys for watching. I just wanted to share how I played the class. This class is very dear to me. So far, this is probably one of those that I really, really enjoyed using in PvP. So you will see a lot of PvP videos on my channel using this class. So yeah, feel free to watch them. And if you do have any questions, you have some clarifications, just let me know. And I'll try to get back to you. Thanks everyone, and you have a nice day.